Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Taiwan On Fishing Podcast presented by Strike King Lures, Lou's Fishing, and Hannay's Marine. I'm Mike Frisch. I am the host of Fishing the Midwest Television, also the host of the Taiwan On Podcast series. This is week 2 of our 13-week series for 2022, and we're privileged this week. We're going to be joined by Jeff Sprague. Jeff is a Major League Fishing pro from Texas. He's actually on the road. He's going to join us from Tennessee, where he's getting ready for his next event. And Jeff is going to have some information on 3 different techniques that I think are really going to be unique and interesting to our listeners. He's going to talk a little bit about the new chick magnet crankbait and how that can help our listeners catch more fish. He's also going to talk about a Texas rig that he uses a ton. In fact, it's a bait that he won a bunch of money on last year, a Texas rig plastic bait. And then we're also going to talk to Jeff about frog fishing, which is a pattern here that in the Midwest and across the country is really going to get going here as our waters warm up as well. So we're going to join in Jeff Sprague just momentarily. And after that, I'm going to share with you a few things that we've been doing at Fishing the Midwest. Just in the last couple of weeks, we've been on a couple of television shoots where we've been fortunate to get in on some really good bites. I'm going to share what we did pattern-wise in terms of those 2 shoots. And then we're going to complete the second podcast of the season. We're going to bring back Tim Emanuel. Tim, the Ice Cream Man Emanuel from Hannay's Marine in Minneapolis. Tim's going to join us this week, and we're going to pose the question to Tim. Hey, we just got that new boat, and in particular, that new motor. What do we do to break that thing in so that we can, increase our odds for having a reliable product for a long time? So we've got a lot to offer. Let's get started. Again, joining us, Major League Fishing pro Jeff Sprague. Jeff is from Texas. He's on the road, but he takes some time out from his busy schedule to join us on Taiwan On. And Jeff, welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, great to have you. So, Jeff, give us a little bit of a rundown of what you are fishing this year and where you're at in your season and what's been going on so far.
We've had 4 events or 3 events, excuse me, and we're going into our 4th event here at Lake Watts Bar. This is the 2022 season. We've had a really strange year thus far. We've had a really cold season, a really windy season. It's been a tremendous year. We've had some really big fish caught. A lot of 10-pounders. We've actually broke the Major League Fishing heavy fish rule, or heavy fish being caught. Randy Howe caught that almost 13 pounds, which is a huge fish. Caught that there in Louisiana on a lake called Bussy Break, which is a tremendous fishery that we were able to expose this year. We're coming into those summer months where fishing is starting to heat up. The Midwest is starting to get good, and then the northern lakes are starting to really pick up. So I'm really looking forward to getting on and chatting with you guys a little bit.
Yeah, good, and we're glad to have you, Jeff. So we're up here in Minnesota. You're in Texas, so actually we're covering a pretty good portion of the country right now. Where I live in central Minnesota, Jeff, we're still pre-spawn with the largemouth. Now we're getting really close, I believe, for the largemouth to start moving onto the banks and to actually get into the spawning process. I'm guessing you guys are post-spawn in a lot of places where you've been.
We are. Our fish really held off this year, even in the South. We've had a really cold winter, a lot of low water here. And when the water's low and cold winters, the fish tend to hold a little longer. And so we're really starting to taper off on that spawn now. And we are starting to, see the offshore bite pick up and the topwater bites and things like that post spawn. Just a great time of the year because you can still find some fish in all stages of the, the spawning stages. But, a lot of guys look forward to this time of year and the post spawn to get out there and these fish start to group back up and they're hungry and they want to put the weight back on. So, this is a really fun time of the year in the South, but it's also coming into a really fun time of the year in the North and the Midwest for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. These next few weeks, as we get our fish like I said, go through that spawn, and then we'll have a few days of recuperation time, and then our fish will really start to go as well too. So like you said, uh, it's gonna be a really fun time when you like fishing bass just about any place you are in the country. So Jeff, if you would, kind of recap what have been the predominant patterns that you've seen so far this year on Major League Fishing, and we can talk about that a little bit, and then we can start talking a little bit about what you see in terms of things, baits, and different things we should be throwing here in the next few weeks.
Yeah, sure. So as you guys get ready, the water temperatures there, I'm sure in the 50s, starting to move up, and those fish will start edging to the bank. Flat-sided crankbaits have been a big deal this year with Major League Fishing and the pre-spawn and then that cooler water situation. So like a bait like the Chick Magnet from Strike King, a huge, huge flat-sided crankbait fan, and it's a tremendous way to catch them. And what the difference is that flat-sided crankbait has a little tighter wobble, and in cold water, that's what those fish are keying on. It's a tighter wobble, and as the water warms up, you'll go to those 1.5s, 2.5s, and those wider wobble crankbaits. So as you understand it, you'll understand that flat-sided crankbait has really been big this year. And then you can never miss out on a thunder cricket bite as well. Thunder cricket has really set precedents in the industry in the last few years, but it's been good because a lot of guys forget about the tried true methods like the flat sided crankbaits, and then the flipping side of things, the ocho bite, a lightweight on a Texas rig ocho. Things like that have been really, really key this year. Those are really big things. And then obviously the jerk bait. Jerk bait's a tremendous way to catch them. A lot of fish, a lot of big fish in that pre-spawn and even around the spawn and post-spawn. We're learning now more than ever that the jerk bait is not just a pre-spawn bait; it's a year-round bait. You're seeing that exposed with active target and forward-facing sonars, and so we're relearning a lot of things in bass fishing, even at the professional level, that we once thought were just niche baits that lasted so long when so many in water temperatures, but we're learning that those baits have a place year round now. So few things like that that'll really come into play for you guys that are, as those fish are starting to move in and still being aggressive to feed before they go on the bed. Those are really key techniques and key baits to be able to use and to get out there and catch a lot of fish.
Jeff, that's good stuff for lures that, like you said, catch them, and they catch them all over the country. Let's talk a little bit about the Chick Magnet. What water depths? You talked about that being a tighter wobble bait, so the fish, like it when the water's a little bit cooler before we move on to, the KVD 1.5 and the 2.5. What water depths do you target with the Chick Magnet? And if you would, talk to us about tackle selections. What rod, reel, and line do you have the best success when throwing that bait?
Sure. So, I mean, you guys have a lot of clear water there, so you have to take that into consideration. But, a key depth for that bait is anywhere from like the 2 to 6 foot of water. You can fish that thing around wood, riprap, grass, open spots, bare areas. And it's just a great bait to just cast and wind, to be honest with you, especially around any kind of vegetation that you can tick with it. That's a huge deal. I really like to throw it on 12-pound test line, and sometimes I'll go to 15 if I'm in heavy grass and I'm not wanting that bait to go as deep. A little bit larger diameter line will keep that bait higher in the water column so you can fish it shallower. And I really like that on a 7 foot Team Lose rod. It's 7 foot, just a medium action cranking stick is what we have there. It's in the signature series. That KVD's got one. There's Team Lose. There's so many different cranking sticks that we have, but that a good 7 foot rod is a good for target casting. When you see those grass clumps, or you see a laydown, or you see a dock post, anything that lets you be a little more accurate. And then obviously the BB1 Pro is huge. BB1 Pro is a reel that's a staple in the industry from Lose. You got that. You can either go with a 5-to-1 gear ratio or a 6-3-to-1. I really like the 6-3 just because with a 6 gear ratio, I can burn it a little faster if I need to, and I can always slow my retrieve if I need to. So those are key things for me. The new
Sure.
Strike King line, Contra line. If you guys haven't tried it yet, I highly suggest it. It's for the money, the best fluorocarbon on the market. It's durable. It doesn't have a lot of memory to it, and I'm telling you, it lasts a long time. So I have everything pretty much spooled up with Contra now, and I have put it through the paces, and what a tremendous line. I'm so glad Strike King got it right, and that guys are going to be able to afford a great line nowadays without having to break the bank.
Right, right. And that's Jeff, it's interesting that you bring that up because I've been throwing the 6 and the 8 pound contra fluorocarbon on spinning for walleyes here in the North Country. And like you said, Strike King got it right with that line. It handles really well on spinning as well. And another thing, and you brought this up as well, it's an affordable line, so guys can spool with a bunch of fluorocarbon and not break the bank to do that. So an outstanding new product. Jeff, one last thing that I would like to key on in terms of the chick magnet. You said, that if you want that bait to fish a little bit shallower, you can run it on a heavier pound test. And that's a really good tip for people that maybe are just getting into crankbait fishing. One of the ways to control the depth, if you're fishing that bait and it's running a little bit too deep, go up a size or two in your fluorocarbon line, more water resistance, and that bait doesn't dive quite as deep.
Yes, and guys shouldn't be afraid, to have a chick magnet or any crankbait for that matter tied on with a couple different size lines. So you can go 8 pound test, 12 pound test, 15, or you can go 10, 15, 17, and see how much that makes a difference in the bait. And we can tell you on the show how much of a difference that a line size makes, but until you get in the boat and try it for yourself, or when you're fishing, and see how much difference it makes in the retrieve of the bait and how much it carries that bait higher in the water column, you won't really understand it, but it does make a tremendous difference and can improve your fishing game leaps and bounds. So definitely try that.
Jeff, that's some great stuff on the chick magnet. And you had referenced a little bit earlier another bait, the Thunder Cricket. That's a good pre-spawn bait, but one that has application all season long too. And it's interesting that you brought that up. We just came off filming a Fish in the Midwest TV episode where we threw that bait tipped with a blade minnow and actually put some of the biggest largemouth that we've ever put on film. So that's a bait that's kind of caught on across the country. Talk more about the Thunder Cricket if you would.
Thunder Cricket's a great bait. It's becoming, quickly a staple, in a lot of people's arsenal and tackle boxes. It's a very basic bait to be able to pick up out of the package and fish. You mentioned you guys tail it with a blade minnow, which is from Strike King. It's a bladed jig trailer. And the bladed jig is so versatile, and you can change it so much with just a trailer. At Strike King, we have done a lot of innovation, and we've done a lot of research and development with the Thunder Cricket. And we've actually, come out with a lot of variations. Now we have a gold blade coming out. We have painted blades out. And then now we're excited to release a tungsten Thunder Cricket, which I think will mean a lot to you guys there in the Midwest and up north. And that's because it's going to have it's going to have a 4/0 hook in it instead of a 5. So it's a little bit smaller hook and a little bit smaller blade to give it a little bit more tight wobble and easier to fish in and out of those grassy areas, which you guys are commonly fishing. And your water stays a little cooler year round than ours does. And that tighter wobble, again, you heard me talk about that with a chick magnet, is key. So as you guys have a short summer and you transition back into your fall, those tight wobbles are easy to rip in and out of grass, and they're easy to clean. And that smaller hook will allow those smallmouth and those largemouth to get a little bit better. So down here in Florida and these other places that we go, fish have giant mouths. You need that bigger hook a lot of times. Where you guys are at, you have really nice fish, but their mouths might not be as big as they are in Florida. So you got a smaller mouth. You don't need that big hook. And it catches less grass, and it's a more compact version. So you're actually going to get more bites on it because it's not as aggressive, intrusive into an area. So a lot of cool things coming out with that tungsten Thunder Cricket to be released this year. And the Thunder Cricket is just a great way to catch a lot of fish.
Yeah, and that new tungsten version, Jeff, is that an iCast release? Do you believe?
It is. We're going to release that at ICAST. I have the prototypes in hand, the final molds. I've been able to fish them. I just came from a writers conference in Georgia with that. You guys check out jeffspraguefishing.com. Either that or go to my Instagram, Jeff Sprague Fishing, and check out the 10s and the 9s that we caught down there doing that with that tungsten Thunder Cricket. Shaw Grigsby caught, one of the biggest fish he's ever caught down there on it. So we're excited to get it into people's hands, and what a tremendous bait that thing has turned out to be for us.
Yeah, and like you said, for us in the North Country where clear water, a little bit cooler water, a little smaller fish, that bait sounds like that'll really be a hit as well. Awesome,
It
awesome. So Jeff, let's talk a little bit. We've covered. You talked about the chick magnet, the thunder cricket, the presence of the jerk bait bite during the pre-spawn and beyond. Okay, now that for those of us in the North Country, our fish are setting up soon to spawn, and then we'll be into that post-spawn thereafter, and then into that kind of that summer peak. Tell us a little bit, what kind of bait should we look at throwing now as we get into the heat of summer, from your opinion?
You guys have very unique fisheries a lot. Obviously, it varies from state to state and lake to lake. But some of my favorite things to do during that spawn is an ocho either with a light Texas rig. So you're looking at a 3/16 ounce weight to a quarter-ounce weight, a 4/0 hook, and just a regular green pumpkin or a blue swirl or red bug ocho, just those naturalish colors. Those are great ways to catch a lot of fish, flipping into grass, flipping it around cattails, reeds, docks, any of those things you can do with it. That's a really big key thing for me to do, around the spawn. It's not intrusive. It's very natural, doesn't spook the fish. And, you can ride that for a good while into the spawn and into the post spawn. And once you come into the post spawn, I really like to lean on a topwater bait. We're talking about a sexy dog. Sexy dog is a great way to catch a lot of fish when it's an explosive way to catch fish. It'll really get people dialed in and hooked, especially for those that don't fish a lot. And you can see the fish come up and blow up on it. It's aggressive bite. It's so much fun. That's one of my favorite ways to fish. And then you can't rule out, like I said, if I'm going to go up, we're going to talk about the frog. KVD sexy frog. You guys, your vegetation will start topping out, hitting the surface. Those bass will be up defending their fry as they start to hatch out, and they're territorial still over their fry. So a frog, a sexy dog, those are just great ways to catch them. And then that frog, you can skip that thing in the tightest spots. You can throw it into anything, not get it snagged up on everything you throw it at. You get to throw it on braided line, and you get to really set the hook hard. So it's a great way to catch fish. And again, it's engaging. You get to watch your bait, you get to watch the fish come up and eat it, and it's fun and it's exciting. And I really like to push that because you get some of the biggest fish that you're going to catch all year on a frog as well, and that's so much fun.
Yeah, it is that frog bite. when a largemouth comes up and eats a frog, there's not much more exciting than that in the sport of fishing. Jeff, let's digress a little bit. I'm really intrigued by that ocho you talked about. Now you're Texas rigging that, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so walk our listeners through the details on that in terms of lines that you're using, rods and reels on that as well.
Okay, so an ocho is it's a stick bait. It's just basically a straight worm for those of you who are just questioning that, and a basic Texas rig. So what I like to do is I like to fish that on a. I have a 7'3" light jig ocho rod out, and it's a Team Lou Signature Series rod, and it was designed specifically for that application. So that 7'3" is a little longer to help you set the hook, especially in those grassy areas, and it's got a great parabolic action to hold the pressure on the fish. That way they don't pull off. I like to pair that with a 17 or a 20-pound fluorocarbon line, just depending. Tour grade fluorocarbon or contra, great lines. And those, the reason I like those heavier lines a lot of times is because I'm fishing it in and around docks or grass or laydowns. You got to get in those places where those fish live, and if you make them bite, you want to pin them and hold them. You don't want them to break you off. So those are key line sizes for me with the rod. I like a high speed reel, a hypermag reel, loose hypermag reel, 7:5 to 1 high speed ratio. That way I can take that line up and drive the hook into the fish quickly. And then obviously just flip that thing around everywhere that you can find with cover, holes in the grass. But the basic Texas rig is I always peg it. So when I say a peg, if you put a stopper on your line and then you slide your weight on and then you tie your hook on. So that keeps your weight from going up and down the line, and you can peg it down and keep it all compact and together. So it sleek, slim line when you're dropping it through grass and through docks and things like that. And the weight doesn't separate from the bait. That's a basic Texas rig for me. And like I said, I'll use anywhere from a 3/16 ounce all the way up to, half sometimes, depending on how thick the vegetation is that I'm trying to get through. and dropping it in those holes in that deeper water. But basically, you're just flipping that around, and it's a great way to catch a ton of fish. Um,
So,
you know,
so Jeff, sorry to interrupt, but
no.
when you pitch that thing in and it kind of glides and darts, um, are you getting it back out of there and flipping it again, or what are you doing after it gets into the cover?
So when you're flipping a Texas rig, there's a couple ways to fish. One, you can flip to the grass, meaning when you're looking at a body of water and you're looking at grass, guys, you're looking for irregularities a lot of times in the grass. You're looking for a clump of grass that you want to flip into, or you're looking for holes. Like if the grass is matted, there will be a hole in the grass. You want to try to put that bait in that hole and let it slide down through there, because what happens is you may see a hole like this on the surface, but underneath it's a cone. It just gets bigger. And those fish use that little ray of light to ambush prey. So when you can drop a bait right in that hole, they will just be set in subsurface there, just a couple feet under the surface, waiting to ambush. And as soon as you drop that bait through, they'll knock slack in your line and they'll take off. And that's just a fun bite. So that's one way of flipping it. And then the second way is if you're casting that ocho or casting a worm, then what you'll do is you'll cast that worm out and you'll actually just raise your rod tip up to a 45 and drag that worm in through the vegetation and wait for a fish to either start pulling back, or you'll feel them knock slack in your line and start swimming toward you or swimming away from you. That's just fishing the worm, actually. Both great techniques, both great ways. It just really depends on the how deep the grass is you're fishing and how thick it is. So those are key ways to do it. Basic 101 stuff, but very effective ways to catch fish.
Okay, and just reiterate for us again a basic color selection. Give us your three favorite colors.
My three favorite colors are going to be black and blue, green pumpkin, and red bug. Those are three key colors for me. Black and blue, if you've got really dark grass or stained water.
Mhm.
You've got green pumpkin to match the hatch, really just a natural color presentation. And then you've got a red bug. Red bug is a little different because people, but when it goes underwater, it changes color. We have to understand the things that go on with the light changes that go underwater. So what happens is that red bug goes down and it's just a great clear water grass color everywhere in the country. So keep those three bait colors in mind. And I mean, if I had to go buy three baits off the shelf in three colors, those would be my first three picks.
Okay. Last question on the Ocho. Are you throwing the 5 inch, the 4 inch? What size?
So I throw the 5 inch primarily. However, when I come north, I always pack the 4 inch. The 4 inch sometimes draws more bites, especially later in the season. You guys will notice that your docks are getting beat up pretty good, and those fish have hook marks in their mouths, and those fish have seen it time and time again. So a lot of times you'll see me downsize and go to that 4 inch to get those fish to commit that otherwise would be spooked from that 5 inch now.
Right. And that's a bait, that Texas rig Ocho, Jeff, that it's going to catch numbers of fish throwing around cover. But anytime you're around numbers of fish, you got a chance of catching a giant too.
I won last year. I won $100,000 on a 5 inch ocho.
Hmm.
For one fish. So in a heavy hitters event there in Raleigh, North Carolina. So it's just a tried and true staple bait. That's a tremendous way to catch a large number of fish and large fish as well. So I mean, I'm just sharing everything that I know with you guys to try to help everyone catch more fish at the end of the day.
Great, great. So Jeff, let's switch gears. We've got time to cover one more technique. You talked about the frog, the KVD sexy frog. Walk us through the basics. Braided line, I'm assuming, heavy rod, all that. Walk us through, how you're doing that a little bit too, if you would, please.
So a frog is a tremendous way to catch fish. It's explosive, it's fun, and it will just hook you in bass fishing. I'm a little different than the majority of your pros that you'll talk with. I like a medium heavy rod. Okay. And I'm going to just throw that out in front of everyone because everyone thinks that when you go frog fishing that you want this just, just massive meat stick that you want to hook them. And, but what I've learned is with braided line, stiff rods and frog fishing, you will rip that bait out of their mouth all too often. I've seen it happen to me throughout my entire career, so I have learned to adapt. I have a 7-foot medium heavy rod. It's a Lew's Xfinity Pro. It's available in Walmart. It's orange. It's an $80 rod. And I'm not just trying to sell you guys a rod. I'm just telling you that's my frog rod. That is what I use. And I use it for multiple applications. It's the same rod that I use for Texas rigging and other applications because that's the way I like it. But when I put braided line on it, it stiffens it up. And so I throw that with a 7.5-to-1 Hypermag reel, same thing that I do everything else with, but I throw it on 50-pound test braided line. And what that does is it allows me to just take that frog, and I'm way more accurate with it. I can skip it under docks. I can skip it in holes. I can make sure when I land it, it's a very natural landing presentation. A lot of times when you're throwing a big meat stick, a big heavy rod, you're just winging it out there, and it's hard on you. It's even hard on you to work that rod all day because it's hard on your forearms. There's a lot that goes into that. I feel like it's much easier on me. It's much easier on everything that I do to be able to use the rod that I use. And then when that fish eats that bait, and we see a topwater bait all too often, we jump the gun and we rip it right out of there. Rip it out of there, and we miss the fish. When you have a little bit limber, rod, you've got that split second of reaction time that everything loads up and it doesn't pull it away from that fish quite as hard. And if he doesn't get a good bite on it, a lot of times what you do is you'll still hook that fish where if you had a stiff rod, you would have actually ripped that frog right out of that fish's mouth. I've seen it time and time again. I've been in the boat with guys who throw a big heavy rod, and there are times that a heavy rod is probably applicable. But for me personally, I'm just telling you guys that you can use any rod that you want in your arsenal. It doesn't have to be a big, stiff, heavy frog rod because not everyone can afford to go out and buy a big, stiff, heavy frog rod just to throw a frog on. So, those are key things for me. The 50-pound test line, the high-speed reel, the good rod, and then the frog itself. KVD frog, we have a bunch of colors out. Your basic colors are like rainforest, which is like a brown color. You can have, your greens and whites. And then you can have, your blacks, just general colors like that. Now, obviously, frogs are different colors throughout the entire country. I've been up north. I've seen green and white frogs. I've been in Texas and I've seen black frogs. I mean, I've seen crazy things, and sometimes colors makes a big difference. So you can't just limit yourself on one frog color, but you always need a bright color and you always need a dark color, depending on your sunlight and your vegetation. So those are some things that I would highly suggest to folks to have. Don't just buy one color frog and think that's going to be the one.
Right, right. And I think, Jeff, that bit about the rod is really good because I know for me, and I've thrown a frog a lot, there's still days, particularly when I haven't fished that style for a while, when that fish blows and I know I pull that frog away from them because it's natural reaction. You see the bite and you want to set the hook on it. So having that little slower reaction rod, that's great tip for our viewers. That's awesome. It's awesome. So Jeff, talk about a little bit before we let you go, your next event and what's coming up on your schedule.
So we're here in Tennessee now. I'm here a little early. I'm at Watts Bar, which is a lake that's just north of Chickamauga. Chickamauga is obviously known throughout the entire country now, in the world, for its fishery. What a tremendous fishery it has been in the past, and it's still a tremendous fishery. But here in Ray County, they're trying to showcase Watts Bar Lake as well, which is only thing that separates it is a lock and dam. It's a giant fishery, and it has fish from end to end. We've never been here. I have never been here, excuse me. Major League Fishing has never been here. So we're excited to get here and see what this lake has to offer. Going to be a lot of offshore fishing here. Going to be a lot of fish just caught river systems, a lot of fish caught on docks, I believe, bluffs and things like that. There's some grass in this lake. So it has a tremendous amount to offer the anglers. This ought to be a really interesting event for guys to watch because you're going to be able to see fish caught so many different ways. You'll see the diversity in the field and the diversity amongst the anglers. And that's what's really good about Major League Fishing is you can pick the style that you feel the most comfortable with and you can pursue it. And that's the thing about fishing. Not everyone likes to fish the same style. Some guys want to flip a big jig. Some guys want to throw a frog. Some guys want to go offshore and throw a spinning rod. There's just do anything. And so that's what's really cool about this fishery, I feel like, is it's going to be able to let a lot of guys show a lot of different ways to catch fish.
Last question, Jeff, and I think when we talked last year about this, but again, talk a little bit, if you would, about the change for you going from fishing for, a traditional 5 fish limit to now you're trying to catch as many as you can. Talk about that change a little bit from a tournament pros perspective.
You know, I used to think that fishing for five was hard. To be honest with you, I remember when I first started, and I was like, "Man, just dear Lord, please let me just catch five." I mean, because everybody, some guys go out and they still just want to catch five. I mean, it's tough to do a lot of times, and it's tough for us, just like it's tough for anyone at home. And then I was invited to Major League Fishing. Um, Let me be honest with you guys. Catching five fish is tough. Catching 50 fish a day is way tougher. I'm just going to be honest with you. It doesn't matter if they weigh 2 pounds or 10 pounds. It is tough. It's mentally tough. It's physically tough. It's taxing. Score tracker is mentally exhausting. And so there's so much more dynamic that goes into the Major League Fishing aspect than what most people really dive into and figure out. So I really enjoy it. I love it, and I do enjoy it more than five fish. But I'll be honest with you, if they said we're going back to five fish, I'd be just as happy because, guys, it's tough to catch as many fish. These guys are good. They catch a lot of bass. There's a lot of knowledge under these hats and in these seats of these boats that are running around out here. We're not fishing against just, anyone. You're talking about guys with 30, 40 years of experience on these bodies of water. And then, their knowledge is just so vast. So it's tough. And I do enjoy it. I love it. But I can tell you, it is a total different animal than fishing for a 5 fish limit because, in 5 fish limit, if you want to just go drag a big jig or throw a big glide bait and wait for your 5 bites, then that's what you can do. You cannot do that in Major League Fishing and survive. You have to adapt with the times and the changes of the weather and the fishery and the time of year. And if you miss it for 1 hour, you're out of the event a lot of times. So a lot goes into it. I do love it, but I think that it's gaining a whole new perspective and a new audience, and people are really starting to come to understand and respect how much more goes into it than just a traditional 5 fish limit.
Awesome. Awesome. Jeff, we appreciate your time so much and your expertise. The stuff that you shared will be so helpful to our listeners here as we get into summer here in the Midwest. And we're going to see you up here in Minnesota in a couple months. I'm looking forward to that. You're coming up, and we're going to film a episode of Fishing the Midwest TV where we can actually show the viewer that new tungsten thunder cricket that you're talking about and some of the other new stuff you got coming.
And I'm excited, Mike, to get up there and get with you guys and to fish around. Minnesota's a tremendous place to fish. I've been there several times now, and it's never disappointed. So I can't wait to get up, and I can't wait to get you guys a tungsten thunder cricket in your hand to see the difference. And I mean, it's going to be a complete and total new wave to hit the market, and I really think guys are going to fall in love with it based on the action. It's just different than a normal thunder cricket. It's like I said, and guys are going to see what it does for them. It's going to be a tremendous improvement.
All right, perfect. We look forward to that. Thanks, Jeff. Again, thanks for your time, and we'll catch up with you again. Wow, that's some really good information from Jeff Sprague, some stuff that we'll be able to use on our upcoming fishing trips. And I want to go back a little bit now and recap two television shoots that we've been on just on the last couple of weeks. And actually, we talked about it with Jeff a little bit. We were on a shoot on Big Stone Lake. We were with Tanner Arndt. Tanner is a multi-species guide over on Big Stone. We were chasing largemouth bass, and Jeff talked about the thunder cricket, and here is a thunder cricket, and that's actually the blade minnow trailer that we ended up catching our biggest fish and our most fish on. And Jeff talked about the ways that you can kind of manipulate the depths that you're fishing a thunder cricket. And we actually started, Tanner and I, we were fishing with a Rage Craw trailer, and as you can see, the Rage Craw has tremendous action in the flappers, and that actually keeps that bait up a little higher in the water column. And Tanner and I made an adjustment. We expected the fish to be close to the bank, and the only fish that we really caught up close to the bank were smaller fish. So we made the decision to slide off a little bit deeper and actually targeted some flats in 5 to 7 foot. And we switched our trailer. We went with that blade minnow. Doesn't catch quite as much water, so it allowed the bait to run a little bit deeper. And I actually ended up catching one of the biggest bass. In fact, I think it's the biggest bass of my entire fishing career on that Thunder Cricket and that blade minnow. And we ended up with a bunch of fish over 4 pounds and just covering a lot of water, heavy line, long casts, and just straight, steady retrieves out on those little bit deeper flats proved to be really good for us. And the good thing is our viewers and followers and fans will be able to catch this action very soon, as Bally Sports North will actually air that Big Stone Bass episode on June 11th. So just in a few days here, that'll be up on TV. So folks will be able to check that out. Then we were back with Tanner just a couple days ago. Like I said, Tanner's a multi-species guide, and one of the things that's happened across the Midwest with as our waters continue to clear from zebra mussels and other factors is we've got a lot more vegetation, and some folks are getting frustrated because the walleye fishing has changed a little bit. I'm not going to say it's tougher. It might be tougher if we do the same old things, but if we adapt some of our techniques and our locations, we can still get in on good catches. And what we're seeing is fish, walleyes in weeds, and some of these weeds are deeper and a little bit denser. And what Tanner's doing right now is he's actually pulling bottom bouncers and spinners on short leads behind planer boards over the top of weeds. So we were over with Tanner just a couple days ago and actually got in on a good catch of walleyes, caught some giant bluegills. I'm talking fish in the 11-inch class, caught perch, caught crappies. A lot of different fish live in the weeds in the summer. But that planer board, I'm just going to show you, we're using the planer boards with the tattle flags because people get a little bit intimidated by a planer board, and you don't have to. All a planer board does is really take a bait. If you look at the design of the board, it just takes the baits out away from the boat in clear water. That's important. Plus in Big Stone, it's multi-lines. Each angler can fish 2 lines, so you can spread your lines. And really all you do is let your bait out. We were trolling spinners and bottom bouncers. It works great with crankbaits. And then your line snaps into these 2 clips. The cool thing is these have what are called tattle flags. When you get bit, the flag goes down, or if you hook a weed and it follows your lure, the flag's going to go down as well. So people get a little bit intimidated by planer boards if they haven't used them, but it's a simple technique. And I'd encourage people, if you're struggling getting fish out of the weeds, consider these boards and either crankbaits or spinners across the top of weeds. We had a really good multi-species catch, and that'll be an upcoming episode of Fishing in the Midwest as well. So with that, let's get our next guest on board here. He is our good friend, Tim Emanuel. Tim is the general manager at Hannay's Marine in Minneapolis. And Tim, welcome to Taiwan On. It's good to touch base with you again. How was your weekend?
Had a great weekend. Pretty chill, pretty relaxed.
Good. That's awesome. So, update us, if you would, on what's new since last week in the marine business, the boat and motor business. And then we are going to ask you to update us or give us a tutorial on how we should proceed when we first take delivery of that new boat, motor, and trailer regarding break-in process and how we get to learn it. But before that, what's new in the industry right now? What do you see in this past week?
You know, there's not a whole lot new. Really, everything over the last couple of weeks has been focused on just getting as much product out the door as possible before a big Memorial weekend. We did a pretty good job at that. We still have some people that are having issues with high water or other reasons that they haven't picked up their stuff yet, but for the most part, we did a pretty good job of getting everybody their boats that was looking for them before the weekend. One thing I don't know that we touched on last week that might be worth mentioning is that over the course of the last couple of months, we have accumulated some motors for repower. We just haven't really had time to. We've been so busy putting pontoons and fishing boats, getting everything rigged, that haven't had a lot of time to do any repowers. So we've stockpiled some of those, and definitely are going to be getting those up on the website over the course of the next couple of weeks. And definitely we'll have lots of motors ranging, I think, from about 25 up to 115, whether you're looking to repower a fishing boat or runabout or pontoon.
So these are new engines then?
New engines, yes. We will have some used stuff, as we kind of move into the next phase of the summer for the service department and have gotten a little bit of help. We're also you're going to be seeing some used stuff come up on the website too.
So Tim, let's talk. I just took delivery of my brand new boat motor and trailer. I'm pulling out of the lot at Hannay's Marine, headed to the water for the first time. Give me, if I'm an inexperienced boater, give me some tips on what I should do, what I shouldn't do, those kind of things.
Well, the two main brands of motor that we carry, Yamaha and Suzuki, have a fairly similar break-in procedure. And I think Suzuki kind of gets a little bit more specific. Yamaha is a little bit more general, but in the gist of it, it's the same. Your first hour, they really want you they always want you varying your speeds. In the first hour, it's generally varying speeds up to about 2,000 RPMs. If you don't have a tachometer in the boat, figure out about a third throttle. Second hour, you're looking at generally about a half throttle, 3,500 RPMs. Usually it's okay to go wide open throttle to be able to plane the boat out. They just ask that you back it off to kind of that 3,500 range, but you can also keep the boat up on plane at that point. Not everybody's a big fan of the break-in period. One of the things that I always recommend is that first hour when you're varying your speed at low throttle, it's a great time to just get used to the new boat, and it's a great time to get used to your new electronics. Everybody's probably got new electronics on the new boat. You got a lot of settings that you need to set up. And, the first thing I do is go in and turn the key beeps down on all my units because they drive me insane. But getting all your menus, your sonar, your transducers picked, your network, everything, all of that picked, and then just kind of playing around and learning your sonar, getting your quick screens added and that sort of thing. So pretty good way to kill that first hour. Second hour, once again, you can be up on planes, so now you're able to move around a little bit. Third through the 10th hour are generally reserved for you get the ability to go any speed you want. Just no wide open throttle, generally for more than 5 minutes at a time. Majority of the lakes in Minnesota, we don't have that problem because you can be across the lake in less than 5 minutes. So pretty easy.
Okay. So, Tim, during that second hour, what you're saying is, if we're anxious to see, hey, what's top end on this boat, we can get it up there, but momentarily and then back it off.
Second hour, third hour is when you're really going to be able to open it up.
Okay.
Second hour, you can full throttle it to get it on plane, but you really should back it off right away to get it to kind of around that 3,000 to 3,500, whatever RPM in that range that it takes to keep the boat planed up.
Okay. So you touched on one thing that I would like to talk about a little bit more in depth, and that's some presets and different things on the sonar. But when I first get in that boat, one of the things that I like to do when I get out on the water is also make sure that my bilge pump is working correctly, live well pumps are working, those kind of things. Any thoughts on that? Any recommendations in terms of the boat part of it?
That is a really good point. As a dealer, normally we're checking all of that stuff at the dealership. Now, you have a little over a 2-hour drive home from our dealership, and wires could come jostled free from the back of the fuse or the breaker panel or the switch panel, or any number of things could happen just bouncing down the road like that. So it's definitely a good thing to check. The other thing is, we're checking at the dealership, make sure that the live well pump turns on, but since the boat's not in a body of water, we're not checking to just make sure that the actual live well fills. Another thing that we're not really checking here at the dealership is the speedometer. So, and once again, tachometer also, just because when we're running it on the flushing hose here to do the safety check, we're not really giving it enough RPMs to know if it's off. So, definitely all good things to check. And just make sure that you check the boat for leaks. Make sure that either that the plug is sealing. Make sure that the motor bolts have sealed. Make sure that all your live well lines and all of that stuff are sealed too. So that's all good stuff to check when you're going slow.
Okay, good stuff. Good stuff. Tim, let's talk a little bit about propeller selection now. In the G3 boats that I run, because G3s come pre-rigged with Yamaha outboards, and they've done all the testing. I mean, my boats, the 4 G3s that I've taken delivery on, they have the right prop right out of the gate, so I really don't have to worry about that. But on some of the other boat brands, you might have an issue with props. How good of a handle do you typically have at the dealership when that boat leaves the dealership on a new delivery, that's the right prop, or is there some experimentation that goes on once in a while?
Well, definitely, and that's kind of the thing. Experimentation can be expensive. Some of the stainless props that are offered now are creeping up close to $1,000. So experimentation gets pretty expensive. And that's one of the great things about G3 and Yamaha. There's a couple of things. Number one, you have the engine mounting height, and then you have propeller selection. Being on a G3 boat, both of those things are all tested and figured out at the factory, which really makes it nice because, we don't necessarily have a budget of $1,500 to $2,000 for every new model boat to just go out and prop test. And even if we had the budget, finding the time and the conditions, you really kind of got to test these boats in various conditions to know what the best all-around prop is going to be. I even know that Yamaha has designed certain props around certain horsepower engines. I believe that you will be... You have run a Reliance prop before, Mike, and that really has been a fine-tuned prop for their 150 to 200 horsepower. And it takes the guesswork out of it because it can be pretty frustrating, especially when you have somebody that may have gone online and said, well, I get 51 miles an hour out of my boat, and you might only get 49. Well, there's a lot of other factors there. There's elevation, water temperature, how you have your boat loaded, and every motor and every setup is always just kind of a little bit different. One of the things that I noticed, too, with the Yamaha that my family has, the 115 SHO, that it really did actually take about 1.5 years for that motor to fully break into the point where I'm noticing, I noticed 2 years later, better top speed than first couple of years. So, going back to what you were talking about earlier, even when you can first get your boat out and try for a top speed in hour 3, it's probably not going to be the actual real top speed. That motor definitely needs to get broken in a little bit more before you'll really know what it'll do.
Good stuff. good stuff, Tim. Talk about maximum RPM on most of these motors. What is it? Kind of standard at 5,500 to 6,000 range, or talk?
Yeah, most of the Yamahas are going to be a range of 6,000. Some of them can go up to 6,300 RPMs. Pretty rare on most of the motors that you're not going to be at least 6,000. That's the other thing to consider is, maximum RPM. If you have 6,000 as your maximum RPM, that's not necessarily when your motor is making the most horsepower. There's always a range that you want to be in. So most of the motors that when you're propping them, your 6,000 would be max, 5,500 would be minimum. And generally the lower end of that is usually when the motor is making the most horsepower. But it just really kind of depends on how you have your boat loaded and other various conditions on, generally we like to kind of see at least in the middle of the range to the top with a light load. That way if you put 6 or 8 people in the boat, you'll still be able to be in range and be able to get your horsepower out of your motors.
Right. So, Tim, let's shift gears a little bit from the boat and the motor, and let's talk about depth finders and settings and that. Now, one of the things that I think all the major brands do now is they allow you to have some preset screens, kind of like on your radio when you choose your favorites, where you can push and go right to your favorite station, or your next favorite station, you push another button. A lot of the major manufacturers now have that in the depth finders, and I know for me, I use that feature a lot. What other kind of things would you recommend to, the person that's kind of into this game for the first time in getting used to using my sonar and getting good, for lack of a better term, at using your sonar?
One of the things that it's not necessarily a new thing, but it's something that I think has intimidated a lot of people for a while. Has been side imaging, and to be perfectly honest with you, I would say that I am not an expert with side imaging. It definitely is something that is a learned technology to. That just right out of the gate, the first year that you use a product, you're probably not going to understand it right. Couple of things is to definitely watch some of the Fishing the Midwest how-to videos on how to read some of that stuff. The other thing too that I think for getting used to the side imaging is go to a lake like Lake Minnetonka. You got like the Big Arcola Bridge, and you got a lot of it's got bridge pilings everywhere and structure and various pieces of structure like that, and drive past pieces of structure that what it is, so you can get a feel for that on the screen. And I think that really will help to be able to figure out what whether you're looking at structure or fish in the future by just finding known things and then seeing how they show up, and then it really will help you to relate to actually when you're out searching for fish or certain structure.
That's really good stuff, Tim. That I actually, this, I switched to Lowrance Electronics this year for the first time, and it's probably been 25 years ago. I had a Lowrance 350A back in the day when that was cutting edge, when we moved from Lowrance C to GPS. That's how old I am. But this is my first time with that new Lowrance unit, or these Lowrance units. And what I did is I went to lakes where I know there's some fallen timber, and used my the side scan technologies to see what that timber looks like on Lowrance. And just knowing that that's what it is a really good way to familiarize yourself as well. Tim, what do you? Go ahead.
So what I was going to say, Mike, is I just have one 9-inch screen at the dash on my boat, and I really like to have a big map I think I rely, some people rely on side imaging. I rely more on my map to try to find structure than most people, just because that's kind of how I grew up and that's what I got used to. But, when you talk about the quick keys, I usually run a screen with just a map and 2D sonar, but sometimes I run across stuff that's really intriguing, and, being able to just hit pages and then over to my down imaging screen to really be able to dial in to see what's actually underneath me is kind of one of my secrets too that I do. I like the two big screens, but then again, every now something really intrigues me that I got to know what's underneath me, so I'll be able to quickly pop over to my down imaging screen.
Right. And excuse me. And for me, Tim, I'm the same way. When I'm running across the lake and I'm, getting from point A to point B, lots of times I'm going to go to my preset that's got 2D sonar. I want to know how deep it is, and I want to know, the map. And that's all I really need to know. But then when I get close to an area, if I'm looking for, deep water walleyes, I might have a screen set up where it's map, 2D down imaging and side imaging. And, with the preset, I can just hit that screen and boom, there I am and have that ability. So, but again, I think a key is spend time with that boat and motor and that sonar when you first get it, to familiarize yourself with its operation and it's kind of practice. I mean, I view it
It
now.
definitely is, and I think one of the biggest problems we have now is that electronics have gotten so fancy, and they do so much that a lot of guys concentrate too much on using electronics and not enough time just paying attention to the rod that's in the water, or your line that's in the water.
Tim, we've got about 2.5 minutes here before we're going to wrap this up. You guys have an event coming up here in the next couple of weeks, a tent sale. Talk about that a little bit, if you would.
It is our yearly tent sale. Our parts manager, Joe, kind of puts this on. It is going to be June 23rd through the 25th, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And we put a big tent up out in the parking lot. And let me tell you, it is a bunch of random stuff. We got a bunch of discontinued stuff. We have some OEM parts, a lot of accessories, fishing rods, reels, some electronics, lots of tubes. Occasionally we'll have some paddle boards. A lot of stuff that discontinues, a lot of stuff like the tubes and stuff like that, they can discontinue every year because they'll change the color. It's the same thing, different colors. So a lot of that, 1 year we had a pallet full of gun cases because one of our reps brought those here. So it's always just a random smattering of things, but I love it and I hate it because I always spend a lot of money whenever the tent sale rolls around. There's always stuff I have to have.
Tim, as always, thanks for your time, and we're going to talk. This week we kind of introduced this topic of, trying to provide some useful information from a boat dealer to customers. We're going to try to do that weekly now through the rest of the year. Plus, we're going to get that awesome pontoon salesman that you have there, Tommy Ferdinand. We need to get him involved in this at some point in time, too. But as always, Tim, thanks for your time, and give us the website address and your hours of operation right now.
Hannay's Marine, Hannays, Marine, marine.com. Phone number 612-781-7411. We are currently open Mondays and Thursdays from 9 in the morning until 7 at night. Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday from 9 to 6, and Saturdays from 9 to 1.
All right. Thanks, Tim. Well, folks, that was Tim Emanuel from Hannay's Marine. Tim is the general manager, of course, at Hannay's Marine, and we have a Hannay's segment each week here in the Taiwan podcast. So this wraps up week 2, and, I think the information you got from Jeff Sprague, there's some really, really good stuff there that's really appropriate for this weekend's fishing, whether you fish Minnesota, any place across the Midwest. You like bass fishing, there's some stuff there that I think can help you out. Next week, tentative plan, and I'm not going to I'm not going to commit 100% to this, but I think Mr. Crappie, Wally Marshall, hopefully we'll be able to chat with him, and we'll be back with one of our retailers next week. We'll check in with Pete from Omnia Fishing. We'll be back in Hannay's Marine with the guys again as well. But like I said, Mr. Crappie, and we're going to talk early summer, that transition phase from when we go off the spawn and these fish start to slide a little bit deeper. Again, some great ways to catch crappies, and of course just to chat with Wally Marshall is always a treat. So that's the tentative plan for week 3. If for some reason doesn't work with Wally, we'll have some other notable either walleye, bass, or panfish expert. We'll talk fishing. We'll talk fishing across the Midwest and beyond like we always do. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again next week. And remember, this weekend, get out on the water, catch some fish, be safe, enjoy, and as always, remember to include a youngster in your next outdoors adventure.